Well, let's take stock. I'm joined here in the studio by Baran Abbasi from BBC Persian, along with James Landale, our diplomatic correspondent. Baran, to you first of all, because this has become, as a protest, way beyond where it started with just a protest against the hijab, hasn't it?
Exactly. Never in the history of the Islamic Republic have we seen protests in such a large scale, from very small towns, border towns, remote areas, to very big cities, very religious cities, in which, like Mashhad and Qom, some powerful clerics, until recently, they would not even allow some music concerts to take place in those cities. And now you're seeing women removing their headscarves, setting them on fire. That's completely unprecedented.
And we're seeing some of the recent pictures, the huge numbers right across the country. But the thing that stands out when this video emerges, so much of it, is the generational challenge that we're currently seeing.
Absolutely. Even in recent days, school children have joined the protest. And as someone who grew up in Iran, went to school and university in Iran, the pictures that we're seeing, school children removing their headscarves, setting them on fire, chanting slogans against the most high-ranking authority in the land, are totally unprecedented, and they could be expelled for that. They could be even arrested for that. But they seem to be fearless and very defiant.
They are extraordinary. I mean, there are pictures of officials being bundled out of the school by some of those young schoolgirls. Those are the pictures there currently on the screen. But in terms of the response we've seen from the regime, I mean, it still has, despite all the history we've seen over the years, it still has the capacity to shock, doesn't it?
Exactly. They have been using increasingly heavy-handed tactics against protesters, and also rounding up activists, lawyers, celebrities, and journalists. Some of them had suspended sentences, but they're summoning them to prisons now as a precautionary measure to prevent more protests happening.
Well, exactly on that point, actually, I just want to put onto the screen, because one of Iran's most famous singers was one of the people arrested. He had posted something on social media, his support for Mahsa Amini. I just want to play a little bit of that first of all.
برای توی کوچه رقصیدن برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن برای خواهرم.
Baran, he has subsequently been released on bail, but it's not just celebrities, it's not just journalists. We are seeing so many arrests. I suppose the bottom line question is, are these protests likely to succeed, to be any different to ones we've seen historically over the years?
It's hard to say. They might lose momentum, they might be crushed, but never the Islamic Republic has ever seen anything like this. And even if they lose momentum, or they get cracked down on, you could expect a new cycle of protests in the coming months.
Thanks for taking us through all of that. James, listening to that, seeing the pictures also. And James, those pictures have shocked many Western capitals. We've heard Joe Biden expressing his alarm at what we're seeing. But those countries, the US, the EU, the UK, France, all talking now about sanctions.
Yeah, and they're very specific sanctions. They're talking about targeting individuals who are responsible for the human rights abuses, so members of the morality police, the members of the Revolutionary Guard, with travel bans and asset freezes and things like that. Canada's already done it. As you say, the EU is considering it. They're going to have a big decision next week when they meet. The Americans we're expecting later this week. So there will be a response. But remember, Iran is subject to extraordinary Western sanctions already because of its other activities, its nuclear program, its regional disturbance. So the question, of course, is how much is this actually going to change? I think what the outside world is saying, look, we're aware, we're noticing, we're saying don't escalate.
The trouble with talk about sanctions is that, I mean, historically, we've seen it now for decades, the levers the West has on Iran, they are fundamentally weak, aren't they? Well,
the substantive ones are the ones that actually target Iran's economy and actually have a real impact on the ground because of the impact. But certainly in Europe, there's always been a caution, a hesitation to impose more sanctions, simply because they don't want it to bleed over into other issues, such as the negotiations over trying to resolve the Iran nuclear deal that's currently stalled. I think the bottom line is this, is that the West is always really cautious before supporting internal protests, because the moment you do that, it gives the lie to what the regime is claiming, that these are all, supported by foreigners and that it's not an actually internal protest. And I think that is one thing that Western officials are very conscious of. They have to be seen to target the regime. If they're seen to support the protesters, that potentially could undermine the protesters. So Western officials are very cautious before getting into that space.
James Landau, Baran Abbasi, thanks to you both.